Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Cameron Blake was always the kind of man many people admired. Successful, intelligent, with a solid career and an impressive ability to solve any problem that came his way. His job required constant travel, meetings in different states, and often quick decisions that could change the course of major negotiations. On the outside, it seemed like he had everything under control. But, on the inside, he carried a weariness that slowly began to accumulate in silence. He knew this pace came at a cost. And, unfortunately, that cost was turning out to be his own marriage. Madeline, his wife, no longer seemed the same as she was a few years ago. The conversations, which used to be long and full of plans, had turned into quick, monosyllabic messages. The calls he made during his trips were now answered with coldness, as if she was always busy, distracted, or simply didn't feel like talking. Deep down, Cameron noticed the changes, but he preferred to believe they were just phases. After all, marriages go through ups and downs, and he was willing to face anything, as long as, in the end, it was all worth it. What kept his emotional balance, without a doubt, was his relationship with his children. Chloe and Dylan had always been his safe haven. Young, but mature enough to understand the sacrifices their father made for the family. Whenever he returned from a trip, it was with them that he would sit to talk, laugh, share stories, and hear about their lives. Those moments were sacred. They were the fuel that kept him going. That morning, Cameron was still getting off the plane, turning his phone back on, when he noticed several missed calls from Chloe. That immediately set off an alarm in his mind. She rarely called like that, insistently. And, along with the calls, there was a message that froze his body: "Dad, come over, it's urgent, please." The simple message, but loaded with urgency, made his heart race. He tried to call her back, but no one answered. At that moment, every possible scenario ran through his mind. Accident? Health problems? Some fight? A situation involving Dylan? He stepped hard on the gas and headed straight to his daughter's house, while his mind created 1,000 theories, all equally frightening. During the drive, Cameron gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to calm down, breathing deeply. He thought about recent conversations with Chloe, and how she had seemed a bit distant. Could it have something to do with this? He also thought about Dylan, who in recent months seemed quieter. And, of course, he couldn't help but think about Madeline, about the coldness that had taken over their relationship, as if something invisible was eroding everything they had built together. Every mile covered felt like it took forever. Anxiety mixed with a strange feeling, as if deep down he knew something serious was about to be revealed. When he parked in front of his daughter's house, his heart was already beating so fast it felt like it was going to jump out of his chest. He got out of the car in a hurry, knocked on the door, and Chloe opened it. Her face was pale, her eyes red, as if she had been crying for hours. She didn't say anything, just held her father's hand and led him to the living room. As soon as he entered, he saw Dylan sitting on the couch, with a lost look, trembling hands, and legs shaking restlessly. The atmosphere was heavy, so heavy you could feel it in the air. Cameron took a deep breath and asked, with a firm but worried voice, what was going on. Neither of them answered right away. Chloe looked at Dylan, as if asking for strength, and then turned her gaze back to her father. She tried to start, but the words got stuck in her throat. Dylan then ran his hand over his face, adjusted himself on the couch, and after a few seconds, managed to say, "Dad, there's something serious, that you need to know." Cameron felt a sharp pain in his chest. The tone in his son's voice left no room for doubt. This wasn't nonsense, nor something that could be fixed with a quick conversation. It was serious. And, at that moment, he realized that whatever it was, his life would never be the same after this conversation. He adjusted himself in the armchair, crossed his arms, and simply replied, "Talk." "I'm listening." The silence that followed was suffocating. Chloe lowered her head, closed her eyes for a few seconds, and when she looked back at her father, her eyes were teary. What she was about to tell him carried the weight of a bomb about to explode. Dylan took a deep breath, quickly glanced at his sister as if to make sure she still wanted to go through with it, and then began to speak. His voice was shaky, but carried a firmness that seemed to have been built over the past few days, or perhaps weeks. He said it all started with small suspicions, things that, at first, seemed trivial, but over time, accumulated like puzzle pieces that only made sense when put together. He recounted how he started noticing strange behaviors from their mother. Madeline would leave the house at times that were never part of her routine. She'd say she was going to the grocery store, but would take too long to return. She'd say she was visiting a friend, but when they checked, they discovered that friend was traveling or didn't even know about the visit. And while Madeline was becoming more absent, she also seemed more concerned with her appearance. Suddenly, she started dressing up more, wearing makeup, new clothes, perfumes they had never smelled before. And it wasn't occasional, it was frequent. Chloe interrupted at that point, breathing deeply, quickly wiping her eyes, and added that this had started bothering her in a way she could no longer ignore. She vividly remembered the day everything became clear to her. It was a Friday, and their mother had left in the middle of the afternoon saying she was going to the salon. Up to that point, everything seemed fine. But, for some reason she herself couldn't explain, something inside her told her it didn't make sense. So she decided to follow her mother. She got in the car and went after her, not knowing exactly what she was doing or what she was about to discover. With a choked voice, she described how she followed Madeline to a completely different neighborhood, far from the salon she usually frequented. She saw when Madeline parked the car and, a few minutes later, a man approached her. Tall, well-groomed, dressed elegantly, and with an intimacy that left no room for doubt. She watched as they hugged, exchanged a quick kiss, looked around as if checking if anyone was watching, and then went into a restaurant together. Chloe said she stayed frozen inside the car for a few minutes, hands sweating, unsure if she should get out and make a scene, go into the restaurant, film everything, or simply pretend she hadn't seen anything. But she couldn't. She left there trembling, went home, and spent hours crying, wondering if she should tell her father, talk to her brother, or pretend she hadn't seen anything. She chose to wait. She needed to be sure, needed to understand if it was just a one-time meeting or if something was really going on. In the following days, she and Dylan started talking. And when she told him what she saw, his reaction was immediate. He didn't hesitate. He took the car and decided to follow Madeline too. And, to his surprise, it didn't take much effort. It only took 2 days to confirm everything. He saw his mother parking in front of a commercial building, getting out of the car smiling, and being greeted, once again, by the same man. A certain Grant. From that point on, the two siblings decided they needed to act. But instead of confronting directly, they chose a different path. They started investigating. They searched social media, found out who Grant was, where he worked, what he did for a living, and who his friends were. They discovered he was single, worked in sales, and apparently had a very active lifestyle. But they didn't stop there. They decided that if they couldn't stop it, at least they could interfere. They created fake profiles, started sending anonymous messages to Grant, making it clear they knew exactly what he was doing. They sent photos of him with Madeline, taken from a distance, along with short messages like, "Be careful, we're watching you," or, "You know she's married, right?" The intention was simple, to instill fear, create discomfort, make him rethink whether it was worth continuing. Besides that, they started showing up in places where they knew the two would be. Not to confront, but just to be seen. It was almost a psychological game. And it worked. They noticed that in the following weeks, Madeline became more anxious, more nervous, always looking around, avoiding talking on the phone near them, and sneaking out more and more. But at the same time, something became clear to them. No matter how hard they tried, it wasn't having the effect they imagined. On the contrary. It seemed that the more they tried to pressure her, the more their mother distanced herself, the more she threw herself into that secret relationship. And this, for Chloe and Dylan, felt like a punch in the stomach. They realized they no longer had control over it. The situation was bigger than they had imagined. That's when they made the hardest decision of all. They decided to sit down and talk to Madeline. Look her in the eye and lay it all out. Show her they knew everything, that they were hurt, disappointed, and wounded. That, above all, this was destroying the family. And that's exactly what they did. They chose a random night, when she arrived home, and, straightforwardly, without beating around the bush, Chloe asked, "Mom, who is Grant?" The silence that followed was deafening. Madeline turned pale instantly, stuttered, tried to change the subject, made up some excuse, saying he was just a friend, someone she had known for a long time. But they didn't let her off the hook. They showed her the pictures, read the messages, and Dylan added, "Please, don't lie to us anymore. We already know everything." For a few minutes, she tried to keep lying. She said they were exaggerating, inventing things, that it was persecution. But when she realized there was no way out, she took a deep breath, lowered her head, and let out the words her two children never imagined hearing, "Okay, you're right, yes. I'm with Grant." After the conversation with the kids, Madeline was so shaken, so embarrassed, that she couldn't even look them in the eye. The pressure, the shame, and the weight of everything exposed that night made her make an immediate decision. Without saying much, she went upstairs, threw some clothes into a suitcase, and as she came down, with a low and trembling voice, simply said she was leaving the house for a few days, that she needed time to think, reorganize, and clear her head. She left with her head down, in silence, carrying not only the suitcase but also a mix of regret, shame, and a guilty conscience for everything she had caused. At that moment, Chloe broke down in tears. Dylan sat paralyzed, staring fixedly at his mother, as if he no longer recognized her. It was as if, all of a sudden, the woman they so admired had transformed into someone completely different. And it was at that exact moment that they understood that, as painful as it was, they could no longer hide this from Cameron. He needed to know. And he needed to know right then. Cameron remained silent for a few seconds, digesting everything his children had just revealed. It was as if his brain was trying to process information he never imagined receiving. His hands started sweating, his heart racing, and no matter how hard he tried to stay calm, the sensation was like being hit by a truth that came without warning, without preparation, without any anesthesia. He looked at Chloe, then at Dylan, and it felt like a part of him still didn't believe what he was hearing. As if, deep down, he wished it was a misunderstanding, a mistake, a big confusion that would soon be cleared up. But it wasn't. Everything made sense. Every detail, every ignored sign over the past few months. The cold messages, the empty excuses, the increasingly frequent absences, the conversations cut short, as if she was always in a hurry or simply didn't feel like talking. It was as if, suddenly, a blindfold had been ripped from his eyes, revealing a reality that had been there all along, but that he, out of love or perhaps fear, had chosen not to see. He took a deep breath, ran his hands over his face, and stood up. He told the kids, calmly, that he needed to talk to Madeline. That this couldn't be pushed aside, hidden, swept under the rug anymore. It was time to lay everything out in the open, face to face, without detours, without half-truths. Chloe and Dylan exchanged glances, a little scared, a little relieved, because they knew that from that point on, things would never be the same. Cameron picked up his phone, called Madeline, and asked her to come home. He said it was urgent, that they needed to talk. Her voice on the other end of the line sounded suspicious, a little tense, as if she already knew, deep down, that something was about to happen. She tried to ask what it was about, but he just replied, "Come. We need to talk." Time seemed to drag on as they waited. Chloe, restless, paced back and forth. Dylan remained seated, staring blankly at a spot, lost in his own thoughts. Cameron, seated, stared into space, but inside, it felt like he was about to explode. Not with anger, but with disappointment. A disappointment so big it barely fit in his chest. The sound of the car approaching made their hearts race. As soon as she parked in front of the house, Madeline stayed gripping the steering wheel tightly for a few seconds, breathing deeply, as if that could prepare her for what she was about to face. She already knew the kids had told him everything. Just remembering their looks, the disappointment, the weight of that conversation, her stomach felt like it was closing up. She knew there was no way out. At that moment, the only option was to face Cameron and admit, face to face, everything she had been hiding. She got out of the car, adjusted her hair in a futile attempt to seem strong, breathed deeply one more time, and went in. As soon as she crossed the door, she didn't need much to notice the atmosphere. Cameron was standing in the middle of the living room, serious, arms crossed, staring directly at her. Chloe was sitting, discreetly wiping her tears, and Dylan, with a lost look, was shaking his legs restlessly, as if he just wanted it all to end. Cameron didn't wait for her to say a word. As soon as their eyes met, he spoke, directly, dryly, firmly, as if holding back the pain with all his strength. "Madeline, we need to talk. And this time, no lies." His tone left no room for escape, for excuses, or for detours. She stayed silent for a few seconds, breathed deeply, and realized there was no point in defending herself or pretending anymore. There was nowhere left to run. Then, she lowered her head slightly, clenched her hands, and replied, with a trembling but honest voice, "I know. I know you already know. Chloe and Dylan confronted me. I know they told you everything." Cameron kept his gaze fixed, unblinking, waiting for her to have the courage to go all the way. And Madeline, holding back tears, continued, "It's true, everything you imagine, everything they told you, it's true. I'm with Grant." Her voice faltered in the middle of the sentence, as if it tore her apart, but the words came out, one by one, like daggers in the air. The silence that settled afterward felt heavy. Chloe lowered her face, squeezing her eyes shut to hold back the tears. Dylan breathed heavily, holding a mix of anger and sadness he didn't even know how to express. Cameron remained motionless, looking at her, without showing if it was anger, sadness, disgust, or all of it together. Inside, it felt like his chest was being crushed. Madeline tried to fill that void, as if searching for a shred of dignity amid her own mistake. "I didn't want it to be like this. I got lost, Cameron. I don't know when, or how. And then she stopped, realizing no explanation would make it less painful, less humiliating, less cruel. She lowered her head, breathed deeply, and whispered, almost inaudibly, "I ruined everything." Cameron crossed his arms, breathed slowly, maintaining that control that surprised even himself. And replied, with a firm, icy, precise voice, "You didn't get lost, Madeline. You made choices. And now, live with them." She tried to take a step, make room for some conversation, perhaps a justification, perhaps an apology that sounded less pathetic, but Cameron had already decided. "I'm separating everything. From now on, your life is yours. And mine is mine. For me, it's over." Madeline tried to steady herself, placed her hand on her chest, as if trying to hold her body that seemed about to collapse. "Please, Cameron, no, it's not like this, don't throw away our history like this." But before she finished, he interrupted, looking firmly into her eyes, without blinking, without hesitation, "I didn't throw anything away. You did that. I'm just ending a cycle that you destroyed. And you know what? It's okay. You're free. And so am I." Cameron turned around, went upstairs, but unlike what anyone expected, he didn't go to pack his things. He walked to the closet, opened the doors, and without thinking twice, started pulling out her clothes. He grabbed entire hangers and threw them on the bed, opened drawers, gathered everything that belonged to Madeline: bags, shoes, cosmetics, documents, accessories. He didn't bother folding anything, just threw them into suitcases, without looking, without hesitating. Every zipper closed sounded like a cycle being violently ended with no turning back. He rushed downstairs, dropped a suitcase in the middle of the living room, went back up, grabbed another, then another. He placed them all side by side at the door, as if physically expelling every piece of her that still remained in the house. The sound of the suitcases hitting the floor, the noise of the drawers being opened and yanked out, echoed through the entire house, mixed with Chloe's muffled sobs and Dylan's heavy silence, who could only watch everything unfold without believing what he was seeing. When he finished, he took a deep breath, looked directly at Madeline, who was pale, hands trembling, eyes wide, unsure where to put them. And with a firm, direct, razor-sharp voice, he said, "You don't live here anymore. Take your things. Leave. Now." She widened her eyes even more, brought her hand to her mouth, almost stumbling over her words, trying unsuccessfully to mutter something. "Cameron, wait, please, don't do this," but he, without changing his tone, replied, looking straight at her, "Yes, I am. And you know why? Because you did this before. Only you did it behind my back. The difference is that I'm doing it in front of you. And you're walking out that door, today." Madeline stood paralyzed, trembling, tears streaming down her face, looking at the suitcases as if it were a nightmare she simply couldn't wake up from. Chloe held her face with both hands, crying like a child. Dylan stared at everything motionless, eyes red, clenching his hands until his fingers turned white, as if holding onto his own soul to avoid completely falling apart. Cameron then walked to the door, opened it, pushed the suitcases outside, one by one, and without even looking at her, uttered the words that sealed everything: "From now on, you are no longer part of this house. Leave." Madeline brought her hands to her head, struggled to breathe, seemed about to collapse right there, but she knew, there was no turning back. She dragged the suitcases to the curb, without looking back, without the courage to face her children, let alone Cameron. Each step she took felt like carrying not only the weight of the suitcases, but the weight of every choice she had made. And at that exact moment, she understood that everything that once seemed like control, security, and dominance, had turned to dust. She had lost everything. After everything that happened, Cameron decided he wouldn't just make a financial change but a complete change in his life. He organized everything, resolved pending matters, handled the division of assets, took care of every detail, and kept the house. It wasn't just a material issue. That place, despite the pain it now carried, was also where he had lived the best moments with his children, and he wouldn't give that up. Chloe and Dylan, from the very first day, made it clear they would stay with him. The home that had once been shattered was now starting, little by little, to rebuild itself, but in a different way, stronger, truer. Madeline, on the other hand, left carrying her own choices. And, as expected, ran straight into Grant's arms. She thought she would have a new life, perfect, full of love, lightness, everything she, deep down, believed was missing from her marriage. In the first few days, everything seemed like a fairy tale. Outings, dinners, smiling in photos, that false sense of freedom and happiness she had always desired. Only, unlike what she imagined, Grant wasn't exactly the prince she believed he was. Gradually, she began to notice strange behaviors. Hidden calls, messages he tried to disguise, unexplained absences, and increasingly flimsy excuses. It didn't take long for the truth to sink in. Grant wasn't a committed man, wasn't someone willing to build a life together. He was a professional charmer. The kind who dazzles, conquers, has fun, and then simply moves on to the next, as if nothing had happened. Madeline discovered, without much effort, that he was seeing another woman. She saw conversations on his phone, caught midnight messages, and even tracked him once, realizing he was at another woman's apartment. The shock was so great that for a few minutes, she thought she was going to collapse right there. But reality hit as hard as it was inevitable. She had nowhere to go, no one else to run to, and, as humiliating as it was, she had to swallow it. Cameron, of course, found out. News reached him through the same paths life always finds a way to deliver. Mutual friends, acquaintances in town, people who, even unintentionally, let information slip. And when he learned that Grant was cheating on Madeline, his reaction was the most surprising of all. No smile of revenge, no provocation, no words. He simply remained silent. He looked at his own life, looked at his children, and thought only one thing: everyone reaps exactly what they sow. There was no more room inside him for resentment, nor anger. Just one certainty: he and his children were together, strong, and that was enough. And while Cameron moved forward, taking care of his children, the house, and his own life, Madeline lived, in silence, the bitter price of the choices she had made. The pain of losing an entire family, of betting everything on a man who, deep down, was never willing to offer anything more than crumbs of attention. And, even knowing about the betrayal, she preferred to pretend she didn't know. Because, in the end, swallowing her own pride hurt less than accepting that she had no one left, nowhere to turn, and that the doors that once opened for her, were now locked. And the key, she carried herself.
Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.